Great Falls is a natural landmark that I had visited many times previously, seeing as I have family just a stone's throw away. This includes a brief feature on Travel Dash in 2022, though I hadn't experienced enough of Great Falls Park to warrant a dedicated video. This time around, I had three main incentives in doing so, starting with the fact that this was my first time experiencing both sides of the park, as it split almost evenly between the states of Maryland and Virginia. As a matter of fact, I'm unsure I'd ever been on the Virginia side. If I had, it might have been when I was very young. So today we'll establish which side is better for those of you who might only have the time to visit one of the sides. 2. The waterfall's flow rate was far more prominent than any of my past visits, coming off the heels of Hurricane Helene, which tragically decimated parts of states further south, including western North Carolina, which was my original planned road trip this past fall. Instead, I ended up having to resort to the Virginias, which was hit far less drastically, but still plenty enough to really get the waterfalls flowing. Lastly, on all of my previous visits, the park's best hike, known as the Billy Goat Trail, had been closed for one reason or another. Although this time was no exception, there was a loophole that allowed me to enjoy the majority of the trail, granting me enough video material to facilitate the video you're watching now. And I'll say, I'm glad to be giving Great Falls some content of its own, as I think it's, no pun intended, great. It's always been, but with the volume of water coming off the falls this time, it's especially so. We began on the Virginia side of the park, which has a lot less to do relative to the Maryland side, but does feature my single favorite view of the falls. And it's not just one view either, you've actually got 3 overlooks on this side compared to just one on the Maryland side. Each one gives a slightly different perspective, particularly of the leftmost section of the waterfall, which is relatively difficult to see from the Maryland side of the border. To backtrack, the main parking lot on the Virginia side is quite spacious and provides access to a visitor center, the 3 aforementioned viewpoints, and a super long trail that leads to some lesser known attractions in the park. I swung by for just about a half an hour, as that was all the time I needed to enjoy the overlooks and get my video shots. The very first one you come across gets you the closest to the falls of any location in the park. As this was my first look at it this visit, I was in awe by its sheer power.
It's always an indicator when it's brown, that means the water level's risen, some dirt has collected in the water. Not some, a lot of dirt has collected in the water. This thing is out of control. I've been here a couple times before and it's never like this. And from all these viewpoints on the Virginia side, you could look out and see this island that is part of the Maryland side of the park. We'll check that out later.
You know a waterfall is flowing well when it's got that brownish yellow color to it, especially in this case, because Great Falls is more so a river fall. It flows a total of 76 feet off the Potomac River, which is a very, very major river in this part of the country. But though it's got a cool location, you'll notice its height isn't that impressive. What compensates drastically is it's got a width spanning 350 feet across. Combined with the fact that you have all these interesting rock formations jetting out of the river, and it makes for quite the awesome appearance for a waterfall. Overlook number 2 is easily the weakest of the 3 on this side of the border, as it seems to provide an extremely similar angle to the last one with a less clear view. Not much more to say here, but what lifted my spirits thereafter is the fact that the final viewpoint from the Virginia side was equally as awesome as the first. And they didn't feel more or less the same either. This one was more of a straightaway look and pure eye candy, considering it frames the falls right in the middle of what's sort of a tiny little gorge when you think about it. So all in all, I appreciated the experience I had up to this point and was ready to venture into the Maryland side to compare.
Alright, short visit to the Virginia side. 3 pretty good viewpoints. The first and the third one were definitely the best. Second one was just okay, but no, it was worth checking out. We're headed to the Maryland side now.
It's about a 30-minute drive between the 2 sides of the park, which is a little inconvenient for those also looking to visit both consecutively. However, it's more than worth it for the variety of attractions on the Maryland side. Now the main parking lot here, it's even a little bit bigger in size than the other one, but still fills up due to the popularity of Great Falls year-round. Similarly, you've got a visitor center here, but this one's more about the history of the area, as this section of Great Falls Park is technically also a part of the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal National Historic Park. I mean, that is a huge park, and I'm not a history buff myself, I'm not going to be discussing all of that too much, but you do have this canal running alongside the Potomac River, with the trail connecting everything on the Maryland side directly in between. Our first priority was to take the Great Falls Overlook Trail across Olmsted Island to the only viewpoint of the falls from the Maryland side of the park. Altogether, this short hike is a very fun journey as you get to see unique flora and fauna in what is, basically an island in the middle of the Potomac. It splits the waterway into a bunch of smaller waterfalls that you pass over via a series of bridges. I absolutely love the way this section of the trail was designed, and I think it would already be worth checking out if it didn't end with an awesome view of Great Falls.
We made it to the main overlook on the Maryland side. That's where we were just a little while ago, and you have to drive like 30 minutes to cross. It's so funny, just to get a couple hundred feet away.
Like I said earlier on, I lean towards preferring the first and third overlooks on the Virginia side to this one, but I wouldn't say this falls far behind. It's simply just a different perspective with the full width of the falls out in front of you. And I think it's cool how you can look out at the Virginia overlooks and see people atop these rocky cliffs on the outskirts of the river. These formations are much more prominent on the Virginia side, which therefore means the Maryland side is where you want to go to view them. And this is best seen from the Billy Goat Trail, which I mentioned earlier as being the park's top hiking trail. The crazy thing about it is it doesn't involve Great Falls whatsoever. While I didn't complete the entire loop, note that it is about 8 miles collectively when you add up all the sections of the hike. The part that hugs the river is like the main attraction and is the section that always seems to be closed due to what they typically claim is flooding.
So, the Billy Goat Trail, Section A, which is what I really wanted to do coming to this park today, it's been closed every single time I've ever came here. And of course, I almost always obey the closures, because if it's a safety thing, I totally get that. But I noticed there's a lot of people coming out of the trail, and I asked, they said it was perfectly safe. They say there's no reason not to do it, so I figured, you know what, I'll try it out, and if there's a part that seems a little dangerous to me, so far it's been perfectly fine, then I can always turn around.
Now there is a portion about halfway through with a gnarly rock scramble that's got a drop off next to the river, which I believe was the culprit as to why the National Park Service closes the entirety of the trail all the time. To get to the rock face, you had to do a little rock hopping on the outskirts of the river, which was a little dangerous. But I did see some people do it with ease, leading me to believe that the closure is complete nonsense and doesn't really make any sense.
Personally, I don't understand why the National Park Service doesn't put a sign at this point saying the rest of the trail is closed, because honestly, up until this point, it's been perfectly fine. So bear that in mind if you come here. I would recommend the Billy Goat Trail. This is a pretty cool part of the park.
Still, I did choose to turn around by this point simply because I wasn't interested in completing the entire loop. I'd gotten a good feel for the scenery on offer and had family waiting for me back at the parking lot who were ready to go. But I did still find the half of the hike I had done to be incredibly worth it. The rock formations are definitely unique and not what I'd expect from an area that is mostly flat. There are tons of interesting views and perspectives you can get, and on top of that, I found the hike actually quite fun in of itself. There was a lot of rock scrambling, hence the name, which does technically classify as a rather strenuous hike, but for my liking, it was a good time for sure. Even if it's got a big fat closure sign out in front of it, I think you'll be completely fine as long as you proceed with caution.
That does it from the Maryland side of Great Falls Park, which was actually really great. There's a lot more to do on this side, I think, and certainly a lot more as it relates to hiking. I mean, of course, the Billy Goat Trail, that was super cool, but even just that walk on Olmsted Island, getting to the main overlook from the Maryland side, that's awesome too.
Overall, when choosing whether the Virginia or Maryland side of Great Falls Park is superior for me, it really does come down to how much there is to do, which as a result gives Maryland the upper hand. I think they're both worth checking out, however there wasn't much doubt which state would win after I had hiked the Billy Goat Trail, which was no doubt the highlight for me. But let me know what you think in the comment section below, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys.